Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Vish and welcome to a series update. I haven't done one of these for a year and a half now, so since the latter half of 2021 to 2022. So that's a year and a half, and you'd think I've made any progress.
Bombastic side eye. Criminal offensive side eye.
So in this video, I'm going to go through all the series that I've completed, not completed, DNF'd, and am up to date on. And I've talked about these books in wrap-ups and recent reads, so I won't go through my in-depth thoughts. I'll keep it brief, so this video is not too long. Alright, let's just get straight into it. Let's go through the series that I've completed since 2021 to the end of 2022. So I've completed 9 series last year and a bit of 2021. So the first series that I completed is Illuminae Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is a YA sci-fi series, a trilogy, if you will, that is written in mixed media like chat logs, maps, just all that you can think of. It's in here. The audiobooks of this are absolutely amazing. It's full cast, there is sound effects. It's really, really good, and I highly recommend the audiobooks. I have really mixed feelings about this series. I didn't like the second book, Gemina, but I really, really liked the conclusion, Obsidio. So I definitely want to revisit this series via audiobooks if I can. I started this series in 2020, I think, and I finally finished the series in 2021 by reading Obsidio. Next up is The Strange the Dreamer duology by Laini Taylor. This is a YA or adult fantasy series depending on what country you're in. This duology is written so beautifully. It's so lyrical, it's so whimsical, but it's also haunting, especially the second book, Muse of Nightmares, which I finally read in 2021, therefore completed this series. I love this duology. Muse's Nightmares, like I said, is my favorite because of the dark topics. I definitely highly recommend this series if you haven't read it. Next up is the David trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. This is an adult Southeast Asian African inspired fantasy series. This has a desert setting, it's very political, and it has a lot of overwhelming emotions when it comes to the characters and the plot and what's going on in here. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I read the whole trilogy in 2021. I actually do have live shows for each of the book on my channel if you want to check it out. And Miss Shannon over here is coming out with a new book in a couple of days called The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. I'm pretty sure it's set in the same worlds but in the past, and I'm very, very excited to get to that because I've been waiting for more books from her. I also highly recommend the audiobook for this series as well. It's like you're being told a fairy tale. The fourth series I completed is The Themis Files by Sylvain Neuvel. This is an adult sci-fi series that's very entertaining, very fast-paced, and it's also told in interview style. I binge read the whole trilogy in 2021, and again, very entertaining. I had such a good time. I gave all of these on the range of 3 stars. However, I still think about this series all the time, just how good it was. Like, it captured my attention and I just wanted to know more and more. So maybe on reread, and I'm definitely going to be rereading this at some point, my ratings might change. Also, again, recommend the audiobooks for this because, again, it's told in interview format. Next up is The Crown of Feathers trilogy by Nikki Palpretto. This is a YA fantasy trilogy, and I feel like this is one of the best YA trilogies that I've ever read, just because of the world building in here is very adult level, I would say, and it's very thorough, which I really, really love. But obviously, this being YA, there's YA characters, YA tropes, YA writing, but I really, really love the sibling dynamics in this, and of course the animal companion in this. They're vital to the story. They're not just there to be an animal companion. I definitely highly recommend this series. Again, I have live shows for each of the book if you want to check it out. The sixth series I want to talk about is the Cassidy Blake series by Victoria Schwab. This is a middle grade horror series, and our main character in here is basically traveling with her parents, who are, I guess, ghost hunters, or doing a documentary about the most haunted cities in the world. So each book takes place in a different city. So I finally finished the third book, which is Tunnel of Bones, I believe, and it's set in New Orleans, and I finished it in 2021. The series was a fun, good time. It's not something that I would revisit, I think. I'm still thinking about it. But I am surprised how scary it is for middle grade. Either that or I'm a chicken, you know, either way. Next up is a duology that I've already unhauled, and that is the Dream Blood duology by N.K. Jemisin. This is an adult fantasy duology that I'm very disappointed in because I thought I'd really like it. I read this in the beginning of 2022 for Aaron's Busy Bee book club, and we were all sorely disappointed. I have only read N.K. Jemisin's other book, The City We Became. I DNF'd that as well, not because of anything wrong with it, I just wasn't vibing with the setting. So I thought maybe I'd give this duology a try. Did not work, so I'm definitely going to be trying her Inheritance trilogy and the 5th season or Broken Earth trilogy. I really want to love N.K. Jemisin, but sadly this duology did not turn me into a fangirl. This is another fantasy series that is set in the desert. It has to do with dream magic, but I just wasn't a fan of the plot and the characters, so ultimately I did not like it, unhauled it, but definitely going to try her other books. The second last series I completed, that is the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbard. I was going to say Chloe Leese, that's not it. Talia Hibbard. And the first book is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is an adult contemporary romance trilogy that I started and finished in 2022. I really love this series because it has a correlation that is very close to my heart. I don't know if I mentioned this on my actual channel, but I know my patrons know this, but I have 3 wonderful lovely cousins, 3 girls, and they all represent each of the Brown sisters, and that's why this series is very close to my heart. Act Your Age, Eve Brown, the 3rd book, is my favorite because any book with an autistic main character will always have my heart. And the last and 9th series that I completed is Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, finally I have finished this series. I started this series in 2020. Finally, in 2022, I read the 3rd and final book of Era 1, The Hero of Ages. What an ending that was. And I definitely think Hero of Ages is my favorite of the series just because of all the revelations and the twists and turns and how it ended. It just was my favorite. The Well of Ascension will always be my 2nd favorite, and Final Empire will be my least favorite, but I still gave it 5 stars, you know? I am wary about Mistborn Era 2 because I think it is very much like a Western and it's not my thing. But I am obviously going to give it a try. Not try, actually read it because it has to do with the Cosmere. I'm gonna have to read it. So I'm definitely gonna continue on with the series, is my point. Alright, let's move on to the series that I DNF'd. So I DNF'd 12 series in the last year and a half. And most of these DNFs happened last year, where I kind of went through and thought about all the series that I genuinely want to continue on and just culled my list. Some of my DNFs are subject to change. Not all of them are hard ones, but mostly it's all hard ones.
That's what she said.
So first up is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I think it is not a trilogy. It's definitely more than a trilogy. This is a new adult fantasy romance series that is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and it's an urban fantasy as well, I believe. It's set in the real world. I read the first book and I generally thought it was okay. I didn't have the need to continue on with the series, so I left it as it is. It's not my favorite Hades and Persephone retelling anyway. Next up is the Ice Planet Barbarian series by Ruby Dixon. If you know this series, this is a very long series, so if you want to continue, you gotta commit. At least I think so. This is an adult sci-fi romance series, and this one is subject to change maybe because my girl Christine from the Roomies Digest absolutely loves the Ice Planet Barbarian series, so because of her I might give it another shot. It's the reason why I don't want to continue is because I'm not a fan of the breeding trope, which is very much prevalent in the series, but there's still a super fun time, so I'm still in 2 minds about it. We'll see what I decide. Third series I DNF is Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. So I started this in like 2020 and I just decided last year I didn't want to continue. This is a YA historical fiction. It's definitely not fantasy, at least from until where I read, which is the 2nd book. There's no magic involved, so I don't think it is fantasy. It's very much like a murder mystery historical fiction kind of series because it takes place in the 1800s or 1900s, and it's a murder mystery because each book you follow a different murder. So I read the first 2. It was good. I wasn't invested in the characters, and I don't think there was an overarching plot. I just wasn't invested as much, and plus it's historical fiction, so I'm not very much into historical fiction, so I just decided not to continue on. Next up is the Green Rider series by Kristen Britton. This is a relatively old YA fantasy series, and I started the series with Abby and Sam in 2022 because we usually have our yearly buddy read where we pick a series and we try to read it. However, this one didn't start well. So we read the first book, we thought it was okay, I thought it was okay, and we decided not to continue on with the series. It's a very plot heavy book instead of a character driven. And me being me, I'm very much a character driven reader. At least it needs to be 60-40. We didn't really get to know our character or all the side characters. We were very much focused on the story. It was a good time, but not the best time for me. So I didn't end up continuing the series. The 5th series I DNF'd is the Wraith Kings series by Grace Draven. I love Radiance. Radiance is so good. This is a adult or new adult fantasy romance series, and I loved Radiance. I gave it 5 stars, one of my favorite books of last year. However, there is a fantasy plot literally in the epilogue thrown in so you can have a sequel and so forth. So I didn't enjoy the second book because there was no point to the fantasy element to it. It was just thrown in there. So I didn't feel the need to continue. Plus, the 3rd book onwards, I think you're following a different couple. I'm not that interested. I'm happy with my Radiance book. Forget the epilogue. Next up is the From Blood and Air series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I'm still very salty about this series. I loved the first 2 books. This is a, again, new adult fantasy romance series that I was obsessed with. I was very much obsessed with book 1 and book 2. And then book 3 came along and ruined everything because it was not a good book. It was not a good book at all. A lot of her flaws became apparent in the 3rd book when I didn't really notice in the first and second book. And the way she dealt with the world building in the 3rd book is by our main character repeating the same questions each time. And there's so much repetitiveness. The whole book should have gone through rigorous editing, but it did not. Anyway, this is not a hard DNF because I'm still recovering from the 3rd book and I may want to continue. My friend Abby from Abby Salter, she read the spin-off Shadow in the Ember, I think, and she enjoyed it. So I don't know if it's a hard DNF or not. So this is a tentative DNF. Next up is the Camelot Rising series by Kristen White. This is a YA Arthurian retelling, and it's only a trilogy, I believe. And I read the first book when it first came out, like in 2021, maybe 2020, I'm not sure, and I really enjoyed it. I love Arthurian retellings. Seeing all the characters in the books just made me feel nostalgic. I love the TV show Merlin, one of my favorite shows of all time. So it's just really cool seeing all the characters that I know and love in this book. But ultimately, the story itself was just okay. I didn't have the need to continue other than nostalgia, and I want to read other books, to be honest. I'm not gonna spend my time reading this even though it's mediocre. So I decided to DNF the series. The 8th series I DNF'd, again another salty one, is Serpent and Dove, a trilogy by Shelby Mahurin. This is a YA fantasy romance trilogy, and I read the first book in 2020 or 2021. Absolutely loved it. Such a fun time. It's about a witch and a witch hunter and its enemies to lovers. It was so good. And then we got the second book and it was horrible. Characters were so different. There was so much miscommunication, which I absolutely hated. And it's just a filler book. There was no purpose to it. I lost interest. I didn't even want to pick up the 3rd book. So I have DNF'd the series. I've unhauled the entire series. Even though I really loved Serpent and Dove, I just think that kind of tainted my memory of Serpent and Dove, which is sad. So yeah, that's why I'm a bit salty about it. The 9th series that I DNF'd is The Patience of a Dead Man by Michael Clark. This is a indie adult horror paranormal series, and it's actually really scary for me. Again, I'm a chicken, so don't take my word for it, but it's basically a haunted house story. At least the first one is. It continues on with the series, and I was just satisfied with reading book 1. I didn't really feel the need to continue book 2 and 3. I just wanted to prioritize other series, and this one kind of fell on the wayside, and then I kind of lost interest. So I'm not going to continue on the series, but I still highly recommend this one. If you want to read a genuinely scary horror novel, with a haunted house setting, this will definitely be for you. And I'm pretty sure it's on KU, so win-win. Next up is The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I know, this is a adult sci-fi novella series that is very much beloved, and I did really like book 1, but I didn't feel the need to continue. I actually tried continuing on with the second book, but I just didn't have any interest. I was satisfied reading the first book and being done with it. So this whole series is basically about this sentient murder bot, and we're following its adventures throughout each book. I don't know if there's an overarching plot, but again, I was just satisfied reading the first book, and I'm okay with that. But I do highly recommend this series if you want a break between dense fantasy books. And the audiobooks are good too. Pretty sure they're just like 2-3 hour audiobooks that you can just whip out and listen. Next up is the Kings of the Wild duology series by Nicholas Eames. I'm pretty sure there might be more books out, but for now it is just a duology. And Kings of the Wild has a special place in my heart. This book introduced me to a community where I met all my friends, and I will always cherish this book because of it. And of course, it's still a really good book. I found it funny. I loved the whole rock and roll theme in this, even though it's kind of like a D&D type fantasy book. I really enjoyed my time reading this. However, I don't see the need to continue on the series because the second book is a companion book to this series, so I'm happy with just reading Kings of the Wild. And the last series that I DNF'd is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. So I read the first 2 books, I think, in 2020, and I loved The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I love the movie, one of my favorite movies of all time. But again, really, I don't have any desire to continue on with the series. Like, I'm okay reading the first 2 books. Okay, so let's dive into the series that I haven't completed, and this is the section of shame. But you know what? I only have so much time and energy to complete the series, and I'm trying my best, okay? I have 15 series that I haven't completed but started in the last year and a half. So first up, we have The Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare. This one was in the ongoing section and then moved up to the incomplete because the 3rd book just came out last month or January, I think. So this is a YA fantasy series that is part of the Shadowhunter world. It follows the children of the characters in the Infernal Devices, which I love. And again, the 3rd book just came out, so I've been waiting for the series to be completed before I finish this series. So hopefully I will get to it soon, but no promises, but at least I know that the series is completed. Also, this will be, and we'll never say never, but this probably will be my last new Shadowhunter book or series that I will read. I feel like I'm done with the world. I'm okay. Next up is the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. This is a YA sci-fi series that I surprisingly really like. So I read Skyward in either 2021 or 2022. I can't quite remember, but I loved Skyward. 5 stars. So I only need to read Starsight and Cytonic and the novellas. However, my mom actually has all of my copies. She wants to reread both Skyward and Starsight to move on to Cytonic. So because of that, this series is not high on my priority list. So when I get the books back, then I'll consider putting them on my priority. Next up is the Spellslinger series by Sebastian D. Castell. This is another YA fantasy series. I started the series because I was part of a book tour for the 2nd book in the prequel, which is The Fall of the Argosy. So I managed to read the prequel, The Way of the Argosy, and then the 1st book in the series, Spellslinger. I'm debating if I want to DNF this series. I had a good time, but I feel like I have other series that I want to make priority. However, again, I had a good time. It's not like I don't want to continue because I lost interest. It's really interesting, and I feel like if I go through the series, it'll be something that I might revisit. It definitely reads more of a middle grade than a YA, at least in my opinion, but I think I will give book 2 of this and book 2 of the prequel and then decide if I want to DNF or not. But I definitely want to start his adult series, which is the Great Coats series. That's what I wanted to say. I definitely want to read that instead. The 4th series that I haven't completed is the Skullman series by Naomi Novik, the 1st book being A Deadly Education, which I think I read in 2020 or 2021. So the 2nd and 3rd book have already come out, and I only need to read those 2 to complete the series. This is an adult, I believe, fantasy series that is very dark academia-esque. I believe in the 3rd book it's a different setting. And I have a love-hate relationship with this series, so I love the characters and the world. However, I don't like the writing. It's just pages and pages of exposition. It's not something that I love when it comes to world building. I definitely do want to continue because I do have the second and third book, and I think that the audiobooks while reading along will help with the whole exposition thing. So yeah, I'm definitely going to continue on with this series. But I think I definitely need to reread book 1, to be honest. It's been a while. Next up is my shame, and that is the Greenbone Saga by Fauna Lee. This is one of my favorite series of all time, and I only have to read the third book. Literally, I haven't even read the third book, and it's my favorite series of all time because I know I love this series. I'm just scared and a chicken to read this series. This is an adult fantasy series that's very politically heavy, and it's also very character driven as well. I am determined to finish the series this year. This is the priority series for me to finish. So watch me finish this series. The sixth series that I haven't completed is The Malice duology by Heather Walter. This is a new adult fantasy duology that is a queer Sleeping Beauty retelling that I very, very much enjoyed, especially where the first book left off. I definitely want to continue on with the second book. There's a few of this series where I literally have no excuse. I literally have no excuse, but here we are. So yeah. Next up is the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor. This is her YA fantasy trilogy that is very much an angels versus demon vibes. I also have very mixed feelings about this series. It is beautifully written. I mean, it is Laini Taylor. I feel like Strange Dreamer duology is more beautifully written than in this. Like, she entered her prime with Strange the Dreamer duology. She was working on that in this series. But the pacing of each book is very off. So from each book you go from a 0 to 100. And when you are in a series, you kind of need to continue on at least somewhat that high pace as you continue on with the book. However, it's not the case because once this book goes from 0 to 100, and then you kind of have to continue from 0 to 100 to the second book, and then again 0 to 100 in the third book. There's a lot of effort that you have to put into it, at least energy wise, with the pacing. So I literally have half a book left for the third book. I already said I have no excuse. I have half a book left in the third book. Next up is the Seven Waters series by Juliette Merlier, the first one being Daughter of the Forest. This is an adult fantasy series. I think it's relatively old as well. Let me just check. It is published in 1999, so it's relatively old. Daughter of the Forest is one of my favorite books of all time and also of 2022. But I don't know if I want to continue on with the series. I haven't heard the best things about the rest of the series, and I don't want to taint my memory of this book as we've seen with other series that I've read. So I will definitely at least give book 2 a try because I do have it. So I'll give book 2 a try and see if I want to DNF the series and be happy with just Daughter of the Forest. I highly recommend this book. If you're a frolicker of the forest, if you're a daughter of the forest, you will love this book. It has some dark topics such as sexual assault, so trigger warnings for that, but it's beautifully told, and I love this book, so please read this. The 9th series that I haven't completed is the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio, and the first book being Empire Silence. This is a adult sci-fi opera series. I read Empire Silence in 2021 for a particular live show, and at that time I was in a massive reading slump and I didn't want to read anything dense, but I had to read this. So I was reading this like a madwoman, and at that time I know I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars or 4.5 stars, something like that. However, now I don't remember a single thing. So I do want to continue this series. I just have to reread book 1 in order to continue, and it's not high on my priority right now, but I know I'm gonna love it because it's a villain origin story, and book 1 held a lot of promise. Next up is the Fortuna Sworn series by KJ Sutton. This is a new adult fairy romance series that it's really, really cool. I really, really like this one. So it's really easy to read. I really like the characters, and it's definitely an urban fantasy as well. I didn't know that going into this for some reason, but it takes place in the real world, but also traveling to the fairy world. The pacing again for the first 3 books has been very different from each other, and I've heard that the 4th book, the pacing issue has been sorted out. So the first 2 books was extremely fast-paced. 3rd book, which I am actually in the middle of, is very, very slow, like extremely slow, to the point of is anything happening? But I'm really enjoying the characters and the writing style, so I do want to continue on with this series. But it's not my favorite fantasy romance series out there, but I do want to know what's gonna happen next. So I again have half of the third book left, and then I have book 4, and book 5 is actually coming out in March. The 11th series that I haven't completed is the Wicked Villain series by Katie Robert, and I think I only have 2 books left in that series to finish. So this is an adult contemporary romance series that I really like. So this series is a loose Disney retellings. The characters in this are named after Disney characters. For example, Desperate Measures follows Jasmine and Jafar, which is, I think, the weakest book in this series. So if you go into the series reading this, you're not gonna like it. Unless you have a daddy kink, then yeah, sure, you'll like it. But I don't really like Desperate Measures. My favorite is The Beast, which follows Belle, Gaston, and the Beast. I'm a bit burnt out by Katie Robert, not gonna lie. So I'm just taking my time with this series and see if I want to continue or if I want to DNF, but it's not a priority at the moment. Next up is another Katie Robert series, and that is the Dark Olympus series. I loved Neon Gods. So this series is a loose Greek mythology retelling because all the characters are named after Greek characters. So this one follows Hades and Persephone. There's no fantasy in this, it's just contemporary. And then the second book for is Eros and Psyche, and the third book is Helen, Patroclus, and Achilles, I believe. So I read Neon Gods, absolutely loved it. One of my favorite Hades and Persephone retellings. And then I read Electric Idol, and it was very vanilla. And vanilla is not a word I would describe Katie Robert. If you've read Katie Robert books, she's not vanilla. So I was very disappointed. And I do have the third book, Wicked Beauty. I will give that book a try and see how I feel. If not, I will definitely just DNF the series. Next up is the Founders Trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett. So this is an adult fantasy trilogy that I binge read Foundryside and Shorefall back to back. And I had to wait for so long for the third book, Lachlan's, to come out, and it finally has. So I only have the last book to read. And the reason why I haven't read it, because I've been debating whether to reread the first and second book before continuing or just read a recap and then continuing. And then also I've heard not the best things about the third book. So I've been hesitant, but it is going to be still my priority for the year after Jade Legacy. So the second last series that I haven't completed that's actually moved from the ongoing series, and that is Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. This is a sci-fi graphic novel series that I love. It's one of my favorite graphic novel series of all time. I've waited for volume 10 for 3 years now. I've binge read the first 9 volumes in 2020. And I haven't gotten to it yet because I'm waiting for my library to get a copy, because that's how I first read the graphic novel series, through the library. So I'm waiting for my library to get a copy. It's taking a while, so I just have to wait. And the last series that I started and haven't completed in 2022 is the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. This is an adult sci-fi series, which is a series of companion novels. So each book follows a different character, but in the same world. I really, really liked this first book. It has very much a found family vibe, and I think each book is a found family vibe, which I love. So I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. It's just not as a priority at the moment because each book is a companion book and it follows different characters. So it's not vital I read it consecutively, but I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. And lastly, we have my ongoing series, meaning the series that I'm up to date with. There's no more books out. I am done with it until the next book comes out. So there's 11 series that I want to talk about. So some of these series have gone to the incomplete section because there was a new book that came out and I've already talked about them. So let's get into the series that I'm up to date with. So the first one I want to talk about is the Charlie Travesty series by KJ Sutton and Jesse Elliott. This is a new adult paranormal fantasy romance series that has sadly been either discontinued or put on hold for the moment. I don't know if they've stopped writing it completely or they've put on hold, but it'll be on this list until there's a definite answer. So I really, really like this series. I really hope it does continue because I'm very much invested in the story and the romance now, and the world too. Especially, it's a vampire-filled world. So we'll see what happens. Until then, this series will stay on this list. Next up is the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. I do have it. It's just up there, and you're sitting on my step stool as a tripod, so I can't get up there. This is a middle grade fantasy series that I absolutely love. It's so whimsical, it's so heartwarming, and the audiobooks are fantastic as well. And the fourth book Silverborn, I think, is coming out in October, so I'll definitely be rereading the first 3 books before the 4th book comes out. I'm so excited to find out what comes next. And of course, I highly recommend this series, especially the audiobook. The 3rd series that I'm up to date with is the Magic of the Lost series by C.L. Clarke, first one being Unbroken. Technically, this series should be in the incomplete section, but I'm only counting all of these series until 2022. So 2023 doesn't exist here, okay? So it stays in the up to date for now. So I read it in the beginning of 2022 and I didn't like it. I gave it 2 stars. However, I see the potential this has, especially when it's called Magic of the Lost. I'm very, very interested to go in that direction, but I don't know if it's gonna go in that direction. I don't want to assume. So I'm waiting to see more reviews about the 2nd book before I dive into it and continue on with the series. But you'll find out in the next series update if I did. Next up is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. This is her new adult fantasy series, and we just got book 2 last year in 2022. Read it, have very, very mixed feelings about it. 5 stars, 3 stars, 5 stars, 3 stars, I don't know. Okay, all I know is that I'm excited for book 3, but also really, really nervous because I don't know if she's gonna stick the landing. I don't trust her anymore. Okay, it's really hard to say because she's one of my favorite authors. Chrono Glass, Akatar. Where is that writer? Even House of Earth and Blood. Where is that writer? It's such a shift between book 1 and book 2. Anyway, not here to rant. It is on the ongoing series because I read book 2. We're waiting for book 3 to come out. Don't know when that's coming out, but I'm excited and scared. The 5th series that I'm up to date on is the Vicious Lost Boys series by Nikki St. Croix. This is a very, very fun, smutty, new adult fantasy romance. It is a smutty reverse harem Peter Pan retelling that is very, very entertaining and very, very fun. I'm actually enjoying the plot in this and the world and the magic system. But again, we know I'm not here for the plot, right? But it's nice that it's interesting. And the 4th book, The Fae Princes, is coming out in May or April of this year. So excited to get to it. I really hope it has more smut scenes because in book 3, I was very disappointed that it was just mostly plot, which again, great. But I'm not here for the plot, girly. Give me those smut scenes. So I'm really hoping book 4 delivers on that. Next up is the Book of Night series by Holly Black. This is the first book in her adult fantasy series. I liked it. It wasn't great. I really loved the magic system and I'm a bit invested in the romance, to be honest. So I'm definitely interested and I definitely will continue on with the series because I'm a bit invested in the shadow magic and the romance. But like Cruel Prince, after I'm done with it, I don't think it's gonna stick around on my shelves. But for now, yeah, I'm gonna continue on. The 7th series I'm up to date on is the Bergman Brothers series by Chloe Lees. This is one of my favorite romance series of all time. This is an adult contemporary romance series that follows the Bergman siblings, not only just the brothers, but also the sisters as well. There's only 2 sisters. I love this series with all my heart. I've talked about it again and again and again, so I won't bore you to death with it. Book 6 is coming out in April, and yeah, I'm going to continue on with the series, obviously. The 6th book follows the 2nd sister, so I'm very, very excited. Next up is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. This is a fantasy graphic novel that very much follows Greek characters, mainly Hades and Persephone, and this is my favorite Hades and Persephone retelling of all time. I again won't bore you with all the lovey-dovey details. I read volume 3 last year, so I'm just waiting for volume 4 to come out this year to continue on with the series. The 9th series that I'm up to date on is the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. This is a series of adult novellas that take place in different worlds and also our real world. And I read book 7 in 2022, which is Where the Drowned Girls Go. And spoiler alert for the next series update, but I've already read book 8 in January, so it's definitely going to stay on this list. The second last series that I'm up to date on is the Wilmot Sisters series by Chloe Lee. I read Two Wrongs Make a Right at the end of 2022. I didn't know this was a series, but apparently it is. It's following the Wilmot sisters. So excited. The 2nd book is coming out in October, I believe, and it has such 10 Things I Hate About You vibes, and I'm so pumped for it to come out and I can read it. For now, I definitely think the Bergman Brothers series is still my favorite, but we shall see as I move on with the series. And lastly, the last book I read for 2022 is the Alex Stern series by Leigh Bardugo, the first book being Ninth House. So this is her adult fantasy series that's vastly different from the Grishaverse. And I know Hellbent has just came out Again, 2023 doesn't exist in this video, so I'm planning to get to the second book before too much time has passed. I'm very, very excited for the second book. I really, really like Ninth House, for sure. Alright friends, those are all the series that I have to update you on. And this brings my total incomplete series to 21 series overall. And my goal for the next series update is to get it down by at least 18. And I'm already starting 6 series this month, so we shall see what happens. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a side-eye emoji because that's how I feel this entire time. But you know what? We're working on it and progress is progress, right? So, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't. All my socials and my Patreon is linked down below if you want to check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!